Your birthday's coming up, someone asks what you're doing for it, and you say the one thing that apparently breaks people's brains. Nothing. It's just another day. And suddenly, you're the problem. Your friends get that concerned look. Your family thinks you're being difficult. Everyone acts like if you don't post a smiling photo with cake, something must be fundamentally broken inside you. But here's what nobody tells you. Psychologists have actually studied this, and what they found? It says a lot more about the people judging you than it does about you. Because some of you aren't skipping your birthday out of sadness, you're not avoiding connection. You've just figured out something most people spend their entire lives chasing. And honestly, that might make you more psychologically evolved than anyone gives you credit for. Welcome. You're about to understand exactly why your brain works differently, and why that's not a problem.
Here's the thing. Society has this unshakable belief that birthdays must be celebrated. That excitement about your birthday is proof of mental health. That if you genuinely don't care, something is wrong with you. But what if I told you that's backwards? Because researchers have discovered that people who skip birthdays aren't one type. They're actually several distinct psychological patterns. And some of them are signs of adaptation, maturity, even freedom that our celebration-obsessed culture completely misreads. You're not broken. You're not missing some universal human joy gene. Your brain just learned something different about what actually matters. And understanding what that is might completely change how you see yourself. So let's talk about the three groups, because one of these is going to hit home hard.
Let's start with the most painful one. Because if this is you, it's going to sting for a second before it makes sense. Some people stopped celebrating birthdays because their brain literally trained itself to stop hoping. In 1967, psychologist Martin Seligman discovered something he called learned helplessness. And here's how it works. When you experience repeated disappointment without any control over the outcome, your brain eventually stops trying. Not because you're weak, because you're efficient, because hoping hurts more than forgetting. Now, here's where the neuroscience gets wild. Researchers Wolfram Schultz, Peter Dan, and P. Reed Montague found that your dopamine system doesn't just respond to good things happening, it responds to the gap between what you expected and what you got. Translation, your brain runs predictions, and birthdays are basically a prediction error machine. So imagine this. You're young. You expect the party. You expect your friends to remember. You expect to feel special for one day. And when none of that happens, not once, not twice, but year after year, your brain does the math. It stops predicting the reward. It stops releasing the dopamine. And eventually, you stop caring. Not because you don't want to care, because your nervous system decided that hope is more painful than numbness. So when someone says it's just another day with that calm, flat tone, listen carefully. That sentence wasn't born from apathy. It was built from scar tissue. Scientists call this the anniversary effect. Research shows that our brains don't just remember painful dates. They relive the emotion every single year. Your calendar moves on. Your brain doesn't. That 8-year-old who waited for people to show up, still in there, still bracing. And the fact that you can say you don't care calmly now, that's not coldness. That's armor. That's your nervous system protecting you, the only way it knows how. But here's where it gets interesting, because not everyone who skips birthdays is carrying scars. Some people just forget.
Let me ask you something. Do you also forget doctor's appointments, anniversaries, what day of the week it is? Do people constantly say, wait, didn't you say you'd do that last Tuesday, and you have absolutely no concept of when last Tuesday was? If so, you're not avoiding your birthday. Your brain is just running 17 tabs at once. Psychologists call this time blindness, and it's more common than you think. When you're deep in a project, a deadline, a life that demands every ounce of your attention, dates blur, weeks blur. Your calendar looks less like a schedule and more like abstract art. These people aren't suppressing anything. Their brains simply filed birthday under not urgent, right next to that dentist appointment they've rescheduled 4 times and that email they've been meaning to send for 3 weeks. It's not that they don't care about themselves, it's that they care about so many things that one symbolic date just slips through. Now, here's the third path. And honestly, this one might be the healthiest. Some people skip birthdays deliberately. Not because they're hurt, not because they forgot, but because they looked at the whole concept of birthday celebrations and genuinely said, I'm good. And if that sounds like you, here's the science behind it. Psychologists Richard Ryan and Edward Deci spent decades studying something called self-determination theory, and one of their core findings is this. The most psychologically healthy people are the ones whose happiness comes from within, not from external events, not from social rituals, and definitely not from a song you never asked 30 people to sing at you in a restaurant. These are people who figured out what researcher Philip Brickman called the hedonic treadmill, that cycle where you chase the next celebration, the next milestone, the next external hit of happiness, and it never quite lands the way you hoped. People in this group, they stepped off that treadmill entirely. Think about that for a second. While everyone else is waiting for one day a year to feel special, these people figured out how to feel whole on a random Tuesday. They don't need a calendar to remind them they matter. They don't need 30 people singing off-key to feel loved. They already know. And here's the part that trips people up. When you don't need a birthday to feel valued, it makes other people uncomfortable because it challenges their assumption that everybody needs the same things, that celebration is universal, that you should want the cake, the attention, the fuss. But you already answered that question for yourself. And the answer was, I don't need external proof that I'm worth celebrating. I've cultivated that internally. Wild, right? But before you think this is all beautiful and empowering, we need to be honest about something. Because there's a crucial distinction hiding in all of this. There's a difference between not needing external validation and being terrified of it. Psychologist Jennifer Crocker at the University of Michigan studied something called contingencies of self-worth, and she found that some people avoid celebrations not because they're free from needing them, but because they're afraid. Afraid that if they let themselves want it and it doesn't go perfectly, it'll confirm something they already suspect about themselves. So they opt out. Not from confidence, from protection. And that distinction matters. Because there's a difference between someone who doesn't need the party and someone who wants it desperately but won't admit it, even to themselves. So here's the question I want you to sit with, and be honest. Is it freedom or is it fear? Are you genuinely content without celebration, or are you preemptively protecting yourself from disappointment by pretending you never wanted it in the first place? Both are understandable. Neither makes you broken. But one leads to peace, and the other leads to a very quiet kind of loneliness, wearing the mask of independence. And that might be worth exploring. So what does this actually mean for you? It means this. The next time someone gives you that concerned look when you say you're not celebrating, you don't owe them an explanation, but you might owe yourself one. Because we've been taught that celebration equals self-love. That if you truly valued yourself, you'd want the party, the recognition, the day marked as special. But what if that's completely backwards? What if the truest form of self-love isn't throwing a party, it's not needing one? What if real self-acceptance is so secure that it doesn't need a yearly reminder? What if knowing you matter on March 8th exactly as much as you matter on your birthday is actually the deepest form of peace? Not everyone who spends their birthday alone is lonely. Some people are genuinely, peacefully content in the quiet. And that's not sad. That's not something to fix. That's just a different way of being whole. You're allowed to not want a party. You're allowed to let the day pass unmarked. You're allowed to find meaning in things that have nothing to do with the date you were born. And if your version of self-celebration looks like reading a book, working on a project you love, or just having a completely ordinary day without performance or pressure, that's valid. That's enough. That's yours. You're not missing out. You're not emotionally stunted.
You belong to a quiet tribe that doesn't need choreographed attention to feel whole. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing was ever wrong with you. If this hit home for you, please like. And if you want to support these deep dives into the psychology behind the things that make us feel different, hit that just scribe button to become a channel member. I would genuinely appreciate this.